All right, we're back. It is COMP125, that's client-side web development, and it's week 10, part 1 of our broadcast. Today we're starting a new unit, Jquery. It's very, very important because everybody, and a lot of different libraries use Jquery. So we're going to talk about what Jquery is. So where do you find Jquery? Jquery.com, I think we've talked about this before, is the headquarters of Jquery. There is a new version that just came out, 3.x. We will not be talking about this version too much because it just came out, like we're talking about within the last month. It is very similar to Jquery 2.x and 1.x, except it has additional features and bug fixes. One of the challenges are right now that Jquery 3.x seems to be incompatible with Bootstrap. So we're using Bootstrap and Jquery, both those two things, no good. So we're going to use the previous version of it. So if I click download Jquery to show you where it is, you can see that they have Jquery 3 as a place to download, as well as Jquery 1. And there's also, if you wanted to, we have the ability to download Jquery 2. It's not here, but we can download Jquery 2. And it's like it says here, one of the things it says that as of Jquery 1.1 and 2.1, source map URL comment is not included in the compressed file because what we want to try and grab is this Jquery. Whenever we have source mapping, source maps allow us to do better debugging. But anyways, if you notice here that there is no option to download Jquery 2.x, which is unfortunate, but we can get it, and we've already got it through our program. So if I look now, I'm looking at a Visual Studio code. I've just translated lesson 10 to lesson 11. I just copied it, and I'm going to put it up on GitHub in a second. Let's make a GitHub folder for this. So here's GitHub, and I'm going to make a new repository here. We've done this several times. By the end of this course, you should be fairly comfortable with creating a GitHub repository, as well as, how to, do pushes and all that kind of stuff to the repository. That's really what I wanted you to do with this course. I'll make it summer 2016, lesson 11. Okay. Again, we make a repository. We've done this lots of times, and now all I'm doing is I'm just going to grab these two lines here. In the terminal that is lesson 11, I'm going to create a new Git repository locally. So I'm going to say git init, and then git add dot. I'm doing different steps. You can actually combine some of these steps into one line. Git commit -m, it's initial commit. And then we'll paste in the stuff that we had from Hop Online, and we're done. There. So our Jquery, the stuff we're going to be talking about is lesson 11, and it's all up online. Now, I've copied everything from lesson 10, including all of the partial files that we've used for our website. We're going to continue with some of that stuff, but we're going to replace some of it with Jquery, right? So as you can see in our scripts folder right now for lesson 11, if you want to copy my stuff from GitHub, you can now. If you notice, today's 25th of July. I can't believe it. It's crazy. Time is flying. One of the things we've been doing last time is we have an address book, and we've been using JavaScript to access the address book. We'll be changing that over this week. Right, so we're going to talk about Jquery. So leave it alone for now. We're still needing an XHR object, but we won't be doing it in the same way. Our reading the data for our nav and everything else, we'll leave those the same as well. In fact, we're going to leave most of this stuff exactly the same as we did before. The one thing we'll be changing is our init. We're going to be playing with our init method just to kind of understand how to use Jquery. So what I'd like you to do is in our init, if you're following my example, we're going to leave these three full functions alone, and we're going to come down in here, and we're going to start doing stuff with Jquery. So I'm just make a little title, say Jquery stuff goes here, just so you know where we are, right? So we can play in this area. Please don't play in the other areas because I'm going to add to it. So again, as I was saying just earlier, one thing that you guys are learning from this course is all about closures, right? We've already talked about closures before. And jQuery, again, I want you to think about jQuery as just a JavaScript library. Actually, let me take that back. I can't say just a JavaScript library. It's like the most popular JavaScript library out there. So I think it'd be remiss of us, if we're teaching JavaScript, not to mention jQuery and to do a little bit of it so you understand what it is. So I've put this PowerPoint up, and as I said, I've kind of modified it heavily. In other words, I've kind of added in my own stuff. And the reason for that is because the book doesn't go into so much detail about jQuery. It's just kind of scratched the surface, and I want to do a little bit more about it. So let's talk about what jQuery is. So jQuery, kind of this open source JavaScript library. You know, it's definitely one of the most popular libraries out there. You know, in terms of what it can do for us. I want you to think about it in terms of all these different sections, and we'll talk about this in a second, but let me just go into this so you guys can see. So again, from a core functionality perspective, you can see that jQuery, it's got all kinds of lovely utilities, you know, and all that kind of stuff. It helps us do a lot of stuff we do with JavaScript, we've been doing with JavaScript, a little easier because there's some shortcuts. It gives us more. It's almost like predefines a bunch of classes and methods for us, so we can use to do the most common JavaScript tasks easier. That's what it does. For example, one of the main sections that I have up here is selection and traversal. Selection and traversal is the way we go through and we do things like DOM traversal. DOM traversal, you guys should know what that means now. The document object model, we go through the DOM, and we can go through and select objects in the DOM, and it's very CSS-like the way we do it, all right? So if you know CSS, then you know how to select stuff with jQuery. Very nice and easy. Actually, we've kind of done a lot of it already with query selector and query selector all. Those two methods are very similar to what we're going to be doing with jQuery. CSS manipulation, how we can modify things with CSS. Events, the event model of jQuery is pretty robust. You can do a lot of stuff with shortcut events. All kinds of effects like animations. We use jQuery a lot for things like carousels, you know, all kinds of other stuff. Ajax, this is the main thing I was talking about last week. Helps us with Ajax, provides utilities to, you know, to do Ajax better, easier. User interface, it has its own user interface. It's called Jquery Ui. That gives us additional tools we can use. We can actually add an additional library that comes up on the jQuery site. We'll talk about it in a second, as well as all kinds of extensibility, because there's tons and tons of plugins that you can add in addition to jQuery to give me more stuff, more power when it comes to coding. Hey, to me, if I can get plugins to help me code better and faster, again, it's all around rapid application development, right? That's how I feel it. So again, there's a couple ways to add jQuery. There's actually 3 ways now, and one of the things that I haven't updated in this PowerPoint is, and I've got to put it out there for you guys to understand, is that so the original ways were you can use the content delivery network. Well, we talked a little bit about that. We're going to talk about it in a second. The second way is direct into your code. If you're a developer, that's kind of, we do that a lot because what we want to do is have more control, and it's right there. If we're traveling or doing something like that, it's immediate. That's 2. And the third way is using something like a front-end dependency manager like Bower, which we've been using now for several weeks, I would say, right? Or NPM. Those are the 2 things. You can use NPM to get jQuery. You can use, and actually on the site we just saw that jQuery was using NPM to install, you know, from a front-end perspective, the version that we want. So NPM, some kind of front-end dependency like Bower. If you're using Microsoft Visual Studio, you could use NuGet to get jQuery as well, and keep it up to date. So there's many different ways to get with jQuery, right? We actually have jQuery in our libraries and in all of our files from day 1. We've been using it. When we have Bootstrap. Bootstrap depends on jQuery, right? So that's one thing we have already. So we don't have to do anything to get it for us. Let's talk about the content delivery network a little bit. And we've kind of, I think I've touched upon this already, but let me talk about it again with jQuery. And one of the things I'd like to talk about is the idea that if I have to serve all my individual files like this on the left, this left picture over here. So when I look at the left side over here, you can see that I have to serve all these files, right? And from a single server. So that means every single time, if I only held them in one place, if a client machine or a group of machines access the server, they've got to download the libraries every single time. So this is a client-server model. And this is okay, but what if you have thousands upon thousands of downloads? This is quite slow, right? So what you do is you create something called a CDN, a Content Delivery Network, where the same library is distributed amongst different servers. And each different servers at different locations distribute the library. The other thing is that in our browser caches the library you've already been in. So if I use a popular library like jQuery 2.2.4, right, and I use the CDN, it actually in production is faster than for me using files that are on my system, right? Actually, that's true about any library that's on a CDN somewhere. And you can actually put your own libraries on a CDN as well. There's some hosting services that allow you to host your libraries, especially if they're popular, and distribute your libraries everywhere. So it makes it faster to download. Some really popular CDNs: jQuery CDN, Google CDN, Microsoft CDN. There's different places to get that, and those CDN libraries. You can see how the information I got here from this PowerPoint was 1.9.x or whatever. This is just an example of the version that you can get for the CDN. And if you actually Google jQuery CDN, it'll give you all the link that you need. So all you need to do is take this script tag, right? This is how you include it. Take the script tag and include the CDN in your code exactly where you would put it in if it was local. So if you had like a local library, you'd use a script tag. Here, all you're doing is a URL to access the CDN. When I first started doing jQuery, I'll tell you right now that CDNs were not as popular. Reason was, didn't always have access to the internet, and you couldn't depend if you're going to be able to access that site. I'm just telling you, that's how it was, right? Nowadays, it's totally different. It is, if you can't access your CDN, the internet must be down. Something's wrong, right? So it's actually more popular to do it this way in production, from a production perspective, than than having it local, if you're going to use something like a jQuery. I'm just going to skip out of this for a second and go back to what I was doing. So again, jQuery CDNs, really, really, really important. And I think I'm still skewed. I think I'm still losing a little bit of my screenorama. Maybe when I come back into the second video, we'll try not to chop off so much. Okay, so that's kind of the one thing. One thing is, how do we use it? CDN. And also jQuery UI and plugins. I mean, again, things like data validation, slideshows, and carousels. Let's take a look what that is. So I'm looking at jQuery project. Here's the jQuery project. Notice that there's a bunch of different things up here. jQuery itself is on the left. Then the next one is jQuery UI. And you can download jQuery UI, which works nicely with jQuery, right? We can download it manually, or we can download it with something like Bower, right? Which is what we want to do, Bower. There's also jQuery Mobile. If you wanted to make a mobile-like front end, there's not a lot of development on this one lately. There's also other things they have here. Sizzle, right? A selector engine that's made from jQuery. Let's go back one more. And QUnit, which is a testing framework if you want to do test-driven development. A little older and not as popular nowadays as some of the newer ones. Jasmine being one that I would recommend, maybe even better than jQuery, the jQuery version. But again, this is innovative stuff. Back in the day when we had nothing, jQuery powered everything, right? There's been some controversy over the last, I would say, a couple years now, where people say jQuery is a little heavy and they have a lot of stuff in there that you don't need. And so on. But for us, for regular developers, the average person, jQuery is great. jQuery gives us a lot of stuff we can do. Here's some plugins. Let's click on plugins. There's tons and tons of plugins here that you can download. For example, things like, and these are all the different ones, 542 UI plugins, form plugins, animation plugins, input plugins, image plugins, responsive plugins for responsive design, sliders, Ajax plugins, scroll scrollable plugins, all kinds of stuff that you can grab right off the jQuery site. Let me take a look at one of them. So if I was going to look at things like scroll, if I click on scroll, scroll magic, right? The jQuery plugin for magical scroll interactions. There we go. Released 2 years ago. Scrollorama, the jQuery plugin for cool scroll animation, right? And so on. Lots and lots of jQuery stuff. So you can actually, if you click into one of these things, you can see that they give you information on how to use it. Right, so these are the tags. If I scroll down, it says how to download it. I can view the page, view the home page. I can read the documentation. Lots and lots of details about how to make this work. It gives you examples of how to get it with Bower, right? The whole thing, right? So I think this is really, really useful. You know, these sites, if you want to download any of these plugins, really, really cool. So, you know, that's the power of jQuery. There's also a disadvantage to jQuery. jQuery in our editor, even on Visual Studio, gives us 0 code hinting. 0. No IntelliSense for jQuery. Either you know it or you don't. You have to look up every API to make it work. And actually, that's true for a lot of JavaScript libraries out there. So we'll have to talk about a fix with this. How do we fix that? There is a fix. It's not easy. But we'll talk about it. And then once you've got it going, you'll see how it's a little bit better. OK. So if I want to download jQuery UI, how do I get it? Again, if I go to the stable version, I can certainly go here and download it by hand for jQuery UI. Or if I want to, by the way, jQuery UI gives us some older tools. Here's some older tools. Things like the accordion dropdown, right? The accordion, right? We don't use this very much anymore, right? So this kind of stuff, you don't see that stuff on web pages as much. It's there, though, if you want to use it, right? It's a little older, right? It used to be very popular, the accordion kind of interaction. Autocomplete, cool. We do some of our browsers do that automatically for us. Different buttons. They, you know, again, take a look at this. This is where a lot of the stuff came from for Bootstrap. You know, check radio buttons, right? Different kinds of radio interactions, like all built in radio groups, which is kind of cool. Different control groups. I'm going to go into that. Date picker. That's really cool. So if I click into there, it gives me this little custom date picker. Not 100% compatible with every browser, but cool. Better than using the built-in date. That's only compatible with things like Google and Firefox. Yes.
So it's pre-built in the browser, like when we are putting in the form like date.
But this is another one. This actually generates it for you. So this is
like from the browser to the
this we use jQuery UI to do it for us. All right, that's what it is. It's totally different, right? Before the browser had it, dialog boxes. This is neat. Dialog boxes are like little dialogues that pop up. That are better message boxes than, let's see, the alert box that comes with JavaScript. And others, sliders, spinners, tabs, tooltips, and different effects, right? So easing, color animation, and so on, different things. So let's try and get jQuery UI. How do I get jQuery UI? So again, if you think about it, if I go to my download page, if I click download, I can certainly download this way. 1.12 is the stable version, right? I can download it by hand, right? And you can see that it's jQuery UI is what I want. So if I go back to the terminal, here's my terminal, and if I do something like this, I load it with Bower because we'll always want to use our front-end dependency manager, so I don't want to ever download things by hand, right? So if I go Bower, and if you look at Bower, if I go Bower help for a second, you can see that there's a bunch of different things you can do with Bower. One of them is search, right? And we can do this a lot. We can search Bower, the libraries, for jQuery UI. So let's try this out. So if I go clear, and I go Bower search, and if I go jQuery UI, like this, you can see that, if I scroll up, jQuery UI gives us what we want, components, jQuery UI. Yeah, and there's 121, 112, right? And so maybe that's not the one. How about this one? jQuery-UI, that's also there. jQuery UI, GitHub component, jQuery UI.git. So if we were going to find the Git repository for jQuery, right, that's how we would find it. If I go back to this, And if I take one of these, if you want to check one of these, by the way, you can always check. So let's see if this is the one. So you can always check it to see which one it is. So copy it and go to GitHub, paste it, and press enter. And you'll see you go to the GitHub library. And is this the one, right? Shim repository for Jquery Ui. Oh, see, takes us back. So maybe this isn't the one. You know, it could be the one. It would work. Here's my source code on GitHub. There it is. But this is the one, Jquery-Ui, right? Which is the you know, the way you get this, right? You can see that there are still some stuff going on, right? Build, add Jquery 3.10, right? This is for Jquery Ui 17 days ago. So there's a bunch of stuff they've been working on lately to make it all compatible with Jquery, the latest version of Jquery 3x, right? Running unit tests, how to do unit tests with Jquery Ui, and so on. This is definitely the library to get it from, and we want to use this one, Jquery. If we can find GitHub, yes. Because people have forked this particular project over and over again. So it's Jquery-Ui is the one we want. So you know, see the pattern, Jquery, and then dash Jquery-Ui. Now remember, Bower can also grab stuff right from a library, even if it doesn't have. You don't have to kind of, you know, tell it, you know, kind of the shorthand, right? But you can certainly, you know, grab whichever version you want. There's Jquery Bootstrap, right? Jquery Ui with just the components, GitHub components, right? And you can try and find that one. So that's one way to do it, is try and find one that seems to be the right one. That's one way to do it for Jquery Ui. And let me just go back. And the other way to do it, if I go to clear, if I go to Bower help, right? One thing that it tells you is how to grab stuff, right? So Bower, whatever the command is, here are the arguments and options. So if I go to install, so if I go to Bower install help, right? Bower install, and they always have more than one. There it is. More than one way of doing things, right? It also says endpoint. You can actually use an endpoint. So if I want to install from a particular library or position, I can do that too, right? I don't have to worry about it. Now, I want you to be careful when you grab any kind of Bower thing. I mean, if I grab this one, Jquery-Ui, just to point out a different way of doing it, I get all this stuff. So where, oh where, my friends, is the Jquery stuff? If I was to grab this one, is it under build? And you can see that under build, I get, you know, release.js, tasks, you know. So imagine if I was to get this one, like this one, the way, how about the UI? Is it under here? Core, plugin. Like this is the actual library, right? This is my actual release where I can go into it. But what I really want is a source, you know, that's been pre-built for me. So this is nice if I wanted to grab everything and modify it. But it says the official Jquery user interface is here, right? This is where I can grab it. This is where the library is. So yes, this is a little different going here than what we were used to before. This is the pre-built version if you wanted to grab everything. Also, if you notice here on the right, there's also something called releases. If I go to releases, you can see that the latest release is 1.12. This is the latest release. And you can also download the source code from here. There's many ways to do this thing. And that's why I wanted to point this out for Bower, just one level deeper than we did before. Yes? It's easy to do. But let's just go back to this for a second. So one way is you could download Jquery Ui, search for the one, and then download that one. The other way is to download the endpoint, which is like the actual URL. Right? That's the other way to do it. Okay, and then some options, minus save, as an example, like we've been using before, right? Or -s for the shortcut, -s. All right, so those are the ways to do it. So let's go back. Again, if I go Bower and I go search for Jquery by itself, you can see that I get lots of stuff. Again, Jquery, Jquery Ui, there's Jquery itself, right? Jquery uppercase or lowercase, same. And it's the distribution that I want, right? Jquery.ui gives me the Jquery UI. That's one way we do it, .ui. And if you're really concerned and if you want to grab Jquery-ui, it's also good. We're going to use this one, Jquery.ui, right? Which is jQuery-ui. This is the one. Okay, so how do I do that? So clear. Let's say bower install jQuery UI, right? Minus save, or you can also use -S and then press enter. It's going to grab jQuery, and if you notice, it is the right version, 1.1.1.12, right? And put it inside its place. Notice that it has a dependency of 2.2.4, right? Which we already have in there, right? And if I clear, and if I go back to my files, you can see that under scripts lib, there is jQuery UI now, right? We're going to put it into place. We may not use it right away, but I wanted to show you where it comes from. Okay. So if you notice under UI, where do I grab this stuff? How do I include it into my folder, right? Because I need to grab it the same way we've always grabbed it. Here's themes, different base themes, and so on, right? That I can grab things like date picker, different CSS, and so on. It's there. But how do I grab jQuery UI? It's not the same as my distributions from before. If I look at jQuery, jQuery has a distribution. There it is, right? Where is jQuery UI? Well, there's UI. Here's different widgets. Here's core. Oh man, how do I get this in there, right? I'm pointing this out because I want you to see it, right? And where's the minified version? Oh man, where's the minified version of my stuff? It looked like the right version that we got, right? But it's not the distribution, right? Oh man, I don't want this version. I want the distribution version. So how do I get rid of this thing? I'm being facetious, of course. You guys should know how to get rid of it. Let's get rid of it, right? Because we want to talk a bit about bower, right? So I would to uninstall something, it's just uninstall, right? So bower, uninstall, and then jQuery.ui, the exact same thing, minus save. You can also put -S and press enter. And then it says jQuery UI cannot be uninstalled. It is not currently installed. How's that possible, right? If you want to see what's installed, let's take a look here. If you go to bower.json, right, there it is. Bower, jQuery-ui. Oh, it's called -ui. Let's try that again. See, so one way of getting it is this way, and then the other way. So if I go bower, uninstall, jQuery-ui, -S for save, it's going to go through there and take it out. Notice it updates the jQuery.json, bower.json file. It's out, you crazy jQuery UI. I don't want you, right? Let's see if there's another distribution. So again, bower, search. Sometimes you have to do this, right? I'm just pointing it out so you guys can see this, jQuery, then UI. All right, so lots of different ones. Luckily, they give us different combinations. jQuery UI by itself, like this. Let's see if this is the one. So try that one. So bower, install, jQuery UI, SS. And then, bam, it gives us 1.12, right? Tells us there's a dependency. And what do we get again? jQuery-ui. So even if you wanted to get another version, just to point this out, I'm getting the exact same version as last time. But here's the good thing about this one that I just got. I got the jQuery UI.min.js, which is the one I want. All right, this is this one right here. And actually, if you just go to scripts lib jQuery-ui, and then you get the details. So if I want to go back into my index.html to install this thing, I want to put it definitely underneath jQuery. So jQuery is first, and then jQuery UI. Otherwise, it won't work properly. So let's type it in. So script source is equal to scripts lib jQuery-ui / jQuery-ui.min.js. We're using the minified version because it's always more efficient than the non-minified version. Okay, there we go. So we have jQuery UI. Let's save that. And we're going to try it, make sure that there's no issues. One, if you notice, there's like a bunch of different, Git says there's tons and tons of updates, which I've added in a library, right? One thing is, I haven't excluded my jQuery lib library, right? Because Bower requires me to install it this way, right? So yes, it's 99 plus stuff, but it's because I've just included jQuery UI. Let's add that into here. So we'll clear. So we'll say git add dot git commit minus m. We'll say added jQuery UI, right? Then git push origin master. And it's up on GitHub. So all my changes are up on GitHub. I've got everything going with jQuery. Here's the problem, though. When I start using jQuery, and we're going to get into it, again, like I said, there's no code hinting. So we've got the libraries. jQuery, the way we get it, I would get it with Bower or NPM, one of the two ways of getting it, for sure, if I was going to work with it locally, or in a production environment, if I was actually going to produce this in a real website, the CDN. That's the right way. And I would just comment these out, right? I would comment my libraries out, right? Because my development task would be done, or maybe I would have a different version of creating the development version, right, as an example, and the production version. My production version of the website would not include these links and everything, not these links here. And all these things would be, I would use a CDN. And also we have a CDN for Font Awesome as well. So all these libraries, I wouldn't even include here. They'll just be pointing to other libraries on the web. And this is very efficient, actually. Okay, so let's go back. So if I go back to my app.js, so far this is where my jQuery stuff lives. I've said that it does that, but I have no code hinting, as you're going to see in a second. So again, we can use jQuery, and jQuery are for data validation, which is one of the main reasons we use it for. Slideshows, carousels, all kinds of other stuff, you can do that. And I just showed you where to get the plugins if you want to check that out. All right, so we want to start doing things with selectors and filters. And one of the things to note is that jQuery has it's got a short form. So here's a selector. We can filter by tag name, by identifier, by class name, by tag and class name. Wow, this looks like CSS, right? And this is what you would put in the middle. When you do in quotations, instead of document.getElementById, as an example, in quotations, you put actually the ID number. You don't do that here. You use the hashtag, just like you normally would with CSS. So if you look at jQuery, it looks like this. $, that means jQuery. That's what it means. It's a shortcut. And then the selector in here, right? That's what we're targeting. Okay. So that's where you select what you want to affect. For example, my document.getElementById, I would just put in here, right, the the hashtag for the ID and whatever the ID name is. Now here's a difference. What does jQuery return to us? And what does document.getElementById return to us? Let's do this together before I go into the next slide. So if I do something like this, var, and let me just look at that. Let's take a look at index, where I'm going to hook into for a second. Here's my a bunch of stuff that I've got. My H1, which is first H1, less than 11. We're going to target this one again. This is just our target, right? So our ID is first H1. So I'm going to copy that for a second, just so we have exactly what it's called. And if I say first H1, right, var first H1 is equal to document.getElementById, right? And I put in there first H1, right? You're going to get a hook into the element, right? And if I hover over first H1, I get, hey, it's an HTML element, because guess what? Our lovely editor here, Visual Studio Code, knows about what getElementById does, and it gives us the proposed return type, which is an HTML element. Cool. So when I go console log, right, and I go first H1, and I run it in the browser somewhere, so let's say we'll go back to the terminal, and we'll use Light Server or HTTP server or some other server that you want, and it pulls up, right? You're going to see that if I go back to my page and inspect, right? If I go to the console here, it says H1. By the way, it says failed to load my favicon, but who cares if you don't have one. But if you notice, the H1 tag says it's an H1. So actually, if I hover over it, it tells me what I'm pointing to. It's returning the H1 tag that is first H1. And this is the key. The key is, when I go back to this, it says, hey, get element single, get element by ID. So I'm looking at this one element that I'm returning, okay? Let's do the same thing with jQuery, right? So we're just going to replace this part here with the jQuery, and this is what it would look like, $, right? And then we're going to put in brackets what it would be, right? So it's got to be hashtag, and then first H1, just like you would for CSS, okay? And now we're going to press boom, right? That's it, right? So you might go, oh my God, like it's like I don't have to put document anymore. No, you don't, right? But let's see what I get when I come back out here. So I did this piece. I'm still consoling out. What do I get? Do I get the same one? Not the same old tag. Not the same old thing. It's not the same, right? In fact, if I go to this thing, here's my selector, first H1. That's what I'm selecting. And inside the 0th element, I get a bunch of stuff. But what I don't get, okay, first of all, there's a couple things. One, if I hover over this thing, what do I get? Any. Because JavaScript does not know what jQuery is. By the way, JavaScript will not know what any language, any library is that you plug in. Doesn't matter what library you get from the web, it'll give you 0 code hinting and 0 ways of knowing that you did something wrong, right? That's a problem for beginners. So there's a fix. And this is, by the way, I have an underlying motive for doing this kind of stuff. I have to admit to you that I'm a bad guy because I'm going to get you guys to do things more efficiently. I know people are going to get mad at me. Don't talk to the professors. They're going to get mad, right? Because I'm going to tell you stuff that they're going to make you into superheroes with some stuff, and you're going to be able to, look awesome, right? But you're going to do it my way, right? If you talk to the professor like, oh, don't show them that stuff. They should know things by scratch. They should know things by hand. Agree, right? But you need code hinting in today's world. So how do I get code hinting? There is a project that I use for other libraries called Typings, right? If I click on Typings, if I go to the first thing, it is a definition manager for every language, every kind of plugin that's out there pretty much. There's so many plugins that it kind of takes care of. How do we install Typings? You need to use NPM. So if your node is not functional for whatever reason, you need to fix it. So this is how you install it. NPM Typings, install Typings -- global or -g, right? We'll install Typings and the search view for you. Now, there's some tricky ways of installing this stuff. So again, if I was going to do this, I'm going to stop this thing for a second and clear. And if I was to do the Typings, I would do something like this. If I was to install, it would be npm install Typings and then -g, right? Now what this will do is, I've already done it. So if you go out and grab Typings and download it, npm must work on your command line, right? On your command prompt. Node must be working on your command prompt. If it doesn't work by now, wow, that's like we're at week 11. And if you haven't got Node working, bad for you, right? Yes. What do you mean? Just this. Just get this. Don't worry about the other stuff for now. All right, so I've got Typings. How do I use it? It's going to take a few moments to download, by the way, right? Because it's going to take some time. Let me know when it's done. Is it done? It's done? Still working. Okay, I'll wait for you guys to get done. So after you download and install Typings, and again, it'll go through its little installation process, yes?
What if you download the same thing again?
Doesn't matter, it'll just overwrite.
Right.
No. Mostly. Done? Okay, so if I got Typings, then I can do something like this. Just like I did with Bower, we just did Bower search. I can do typing search, and let's say I want jQuery. So I can do something like this, typing search jQuery. If I do that, it'll come up with a bunch of responses. I'm just going to make this window bigger for you guys so you can see it. All right? Make it as big as I can without going outside the bounds. Actually, it is already outside the bounds. There. All right, so lots and lots of them. Here's Chai jQuery, Jasmine jQuery. Oh, there's one. There's jQuery right here. And it tells you this. jQuery is the one I want. Source, right? Source, DT, right? And then what's the main home page? jQuery.com, right? And when it was updated last, right? So that's the way you get it. Okay, this is good. This is a good thing, right? Because what jQuery, this Typings does is if we install it, it should be able to give us type definitions or code hinting for Visual Studio Code, all right? How do we do that? How do we install it, first of all? Let's just talk about installing it. And the other thing we have to look at is Jquery Ui. Does it also, because Jquery has a totally different library. So if you want to get code hinting for Jquery Ui, you have to do this again, right? Because this is just for Jquery. So So let's go back here, clear. This is the install thing that you put in. So you go typings, install. Now, remember that source, DT, you got to put that in. DT stands for definitely typed, which is actually the project that's up on GitHub. Definitely typed. Definitely typed is a GitHub project that basically is every single kind of thing up there. There's so many of them in here that actually what's happened is they've truncated. There are more than 1,000 different sub projects that are in here. We have so many libraries that definitely type takes a look at, and you can see that all the most popular ones like jQuery and Bootstrap and so I keep going, like tons and tons of them. So this is the repository for all type definitions. It's a community updated and supported library. So DT and then tilde. My tilde is in the top left corner of my screen, so the top left corner of my keyboard. It's this little funny sign, tilde, which is next to the 1 usually, right? Underneath the tilde, there's the backtick, right? You need to use that, right? And then the name of the library, jQuery, right? Now here's the two things you need: -G, -S. S for save, -G for global definitions. That's the file. That's what you do. So typings install is for everything. DT is definitely typed. Tilde, whatever the library is called, jQuery, as an example. -G for global, -S for save inside your typings. Yes? The way I've written it is what you have to do. So the answer is yes. All right? Then press enter. Oops. Enter. And then it's going to say, oh, it says update available from 1.3.1 to 1.3.2 for typings. Do I need to do this now? No, I don't. What did it do? It says jQuery, no dependencies. This is what it should get. That's what you should get back. And means that you don't have to download any other typings, just jQuery. And if I go back to my files for a second, I'm going to have another file, another folder in here that I magically put in called typings. Typings, right? And I have index.d.ts. This index.d.ts is the type definitions for jQuery. All right, let me close this down for a second to be safe. And we're going to reopen up that file again. And you need to do this sometimes. Save. If I go back into my scripts, I've just closed down my tabs, right? Sometimes you need to do that from a caching perspective. Go to app.js. And now let's type this $ in there again. If I go $, and if I start typing, oh, what do I get now? Code hinting, all right? Which is what I need. And if I type in there, it tells me what I can put in there. So here's my selector. Guys, this is golden, okay? If you don't get this, right, and you're trying to use jQuery or any other library, right, you're hamstrung. You'll have to go back to the API documentation over and over again to figure out if you put it right. You know, can't remember. You know, we do that anyway, but still, it's just a little bit better than the way we do it here. You see that it says selector string. Here's my context, you know, as an example. And so I can put in there, like I said, right, if I kind of put in there, oops, that's the wrong one. You know, what is it? First H1. I think it's what I had in there. Let's go back in. First H1. Here it is. And if I go back to app.js, right, there it is. First H1. And then now, here's the thing. If I save it and I go hover over this, what am I getting? jQuery. But it's not an element. It's not an element. That's the thing to note, right? You're returning here is you're returning the class that you're getting back from this, right? Typically, we don't do just this with jQuery. jQuery by itself returns, you know, if I just kind of hover over what, you know, this whole thing, you can see that $ jQuery static, and then what does it return? It returns jQuery. It returns a query element, a query node, if you will. It does not return an HTML element. That's not what it gets back, right? So then, if you want to get back the same thing, how do I get that? If I press dot, you can see that there's tons of stuff that it gives us back. These are all the different classes and properties, right? And if I want to get back, you know, the HTML, right? Here's my HTML, right? If now, what does that mean, HTML? What do I get back? Here's HTML. It must be a property, right? Or sorry, it must be a method. It's a method, right? It says get the HTML contents of the first element in the set of attached elements. I want to point this out for you, for example, right? First H1 targets all. It's a query selector all. That's what it is. It's equivalent. Give me all elements that meet the hashtag first H1 ID matching, right? Put them inside here. Now notice that I'm going to get back a string because I did this, and I kind of put it to here. This is a string now. It's not anymore an element. All right, that's a different thing too, right? If I do this, I just get back a string version of the HTML that's inside the node that I'm looking at. All right, so that's different too. Let's take a look and see what I get. So if I go back to this, and oh man, browse sync client. Oh yeah, because I'm right server. Right, there we go. Let's kill this one and open this one. So I just get this. This is not what I got either with document.getElementById. This is just the string version of this. That's all it is. Okay, I'm just making the differences so you understand what jQuery does. It's not the same as JavaScript. It's not. All right, next. Let's try other things we can do here with jQuery. So you can do something. One thing to do with jQuery when you learn jQuery is it does a lot of method chaining. And the way we do method chaining is to do one dot after the other dot after the other dot after the other dot and keep going down the thing. For example, HTML, I can go do something like this, dot, and I can do something like, so it says returns, if I go to the anchor, returns an anchor of the HTML anchor element. If I go blink, right, if I hover over it, it says, and if I want to know what blink does, so if I type blink, it says returns a blink HTML element. Well, there's no blink HTML element. By the way, we don't use blink anymore for anything. It's like 1990s. All right, please don't use blink. But it can do it if you really want to. You can do it. Returns the bold version, a fixed length. How about the length? What does this do? This is kind of cool. So the HTML length. All right, and this is a property. So returns a number. Now, if I hover over here, it's a number. It knows that it's a number that I'm returning, right? Not the actual string. So if I go back, 42, what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably 42 characters in length, right? That's what it is. So there's some really cool things you can do, but just putting jQuery in there like this does not give you the same stuff that document.getElementById gives you. That's what I wanted to point out here. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. So again, pattern, $ means jQuery. Whatever the selector you're targeting is next. Here's some examples. If I want to target the paragraph elements, notice what it says here, and I want you to keep track. All paragraph elements, not one paragraph element. If I want to get the first paragraph element, how do I get that? Yes. No. This is this like this. You don't put P1 in here. You got to think about what this does. This is exactly like CSS. So what would you? Square brackets, right? Yeah. So in that case, if that's true, if I go back, and if I want to get the first response, my first H1, so the first tag, whatever it is, the first element that has an ID of first H1, because it's all of them, then I got to put in square bracket 0. Because this is the first. This is an array. This returns an array. Now, what do I get back? HTML element, which is what we got with document.getElementById. All right. Is this as readable as document.getElementById? No. That's the challenge. When we learn jQuery, sometimes what happens, I'm just saving it so I can go back here. Sometimes what happens is our code becomes a little bit more cryptic. See how it's back to normal again? Our code becomes a little bit more cryptic to understand what's happening with jQuery. However, the great thing is a conservation of code, right? It's a much smaller space. You can write a lot more powerful things within one line. For a lot of people up there, you might see a lot of jQuery stuff written that you want to do in jQuery, which means it's a compressed version of JavaScript, because all they're doing is they're using jQuery libraries that do the same thing that JavaScript would do in a much longer way. Much more typing is what I'm saying. By the way, you can do everything you do with jQuery with simple JavaScript, plain old JavaScript, right? POJ, right? As opposed to doing it with jQuery. but jQuery has a lot of cool features. So this is one. So this is the first thing to note. So this, and I'll say, is equivalent to var first h1 is equal to document.getElementById first h1. That's the same thing. This up here, line, same as this line. Because this returns all elements that match this pattern, not one. If you notice here, element. Okay? So that's the first thing to know. Yes?
So we can add an event listener also in jQuery?
Yes. Event listers we'll get to in a sec. Okay, let's keep going. So some patterns. This is important to understand the patterns. How to do it. So this is a class. So we're getting all elements with the plus class. Plus is a class. All elements, right? This is neat. Here's neat too. Descendants. So again, exactly like it would work with CSS. Here is, I want all paragraph elements, right, that are descendants of the section element. Section of the section element facts. So P. So all paragraph elements are with this one, right? This is what this does. Adjacent siblings. I use the plus just like I would with CSS, right? Elements that are siblings of you or general sibling with the tilde, right? And children. So UL is as a child of div. So I'm saying select all unordered lists that are children of div tags. Get all those, right? All. I'm always returning an array every single time. So if you're scared of arrays, you have to get comfortable with jQuery because jQuery uses arrays for everything. Why? There's a reason for it, because they like to loop through each of the array elements and then do things to all of them, right? All right. Again, we talked about this already, but we call jQuery methods with the dot accessor. So it's the selector and then dot method name and then something, parameters, right? Here's some really popular common methods. So I want to get the value of a text box or some other form control. I can go val, right? I want to get the text of an element. I can do that too, right? The next sibling of an element, I can get that too. I can submit the form by using the submit method. I can move the focus to another control or link. I can do these. This is very common stuff, right? And they give you some examples here in the PowerPoint on how to do this, right? And this example would be var gallon. So I'm looking at how to get the value from a text box. Let's say the text box is called gallons, right? And I can get the value of the text box. Now remember, this returns a list of an array of text boxes. So if I want to get the value of an element, I can do that. Okay, here's something. So I want to get the HTML, right? The HTML of my element. Remember I did this already. Can I just do this? If I want to get the HTML value or inner HTML, that's what I want to get of my first H1, right? I'm just getting stuff right now, right? Could I do something like this? Could I say something like, well, first H1, if I type first H1 dot, these are all the things I can do with that. I can do blur, I can do children, child node, blah, 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 click. Oh, there's your event handling methods, right? Clone node contains, all this kind of stuff, but I want to go down in here and you can see that here's get elements, different kind of things. Here's inner HTML. I can do that, right? Inner HTML. But is that a jQuery method or is that a JavaScript method, right? So can I still do the same thing? Can I still do inner HTML? Like, is that a property that makes sense? Because this is an element, right? Remember? This is an element. It's no longer jQuery. That's why I can do this. So if I go this, right, that means that I can do the same thing because I'm converting everything back to JavaScript. If I do this piece, if I put this extra, the first element, I'm only getting one element back. So if I go dot inner HTML and I press save, and if I go back to thing, I can see that I'm getting the same thing I got before, right? All right. But what if I don't do this and I want to get my inner HTML? Does this work now? Well, let's see what I get, right? I get nothing. Because jQuery doesn't have an inner HTML. If I go HTML, right? Remember, you have to know what the things you can do. Here's HTML, right? There it is. That's different. That'll give me the HTML, and it'll give it to me in a very clear way. Look, function A, return K, this function, blah, 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 blah. This isn't what I wanted. How come? Right? How about the val? Can I get the first H1? Does H1 have a value? Val, right? Can I get this? Oh, no, there's no value. And did I miss something with HTML? This is where code hinting really helps. HTML, that little square means it's a method, not a property. That's why I got the function back. Well, there he is. There's HTML, right? So you got to watch to see what it is, and that's why code hinting really helps, right? Without going to the API documentation over and over again. All right, so again, different things that are there. You know, that's one thing it helps us with. If I go back to the PowerPoint, it helps us do some basic things. Here's how to set the value. If I want to set a value for an element, and val must be an attribute for the value, and it has to make sense for an input element. Well, there is no input element. How about to set the text in an element? So here's email, whatever it is. I'm targeting this. I'm going to set the text of the element. This is how I do it. Document chaining, right? So or a method chaining. So I'm going to go back here and say, I want to set the inner HTML or the text of the element. All right, so before I do a console out now, I'm just going to do something like this. I want to say first H1, and then I'm going to say, you know, text, and then I want to put in, this is one of the ones I have. Now I have a bunch of overloads, guys. Look what I can do here. You can go through here and you can see that there is some other options, right? So I can put in a number. Look what it says here. Text is a function. I can pass in a number and it returns a string. I can do it that way too. There's lots of different things here. Or I can pass in what I want. If I just do this, I get the combined text contents, right? If I do this, I can set the content of each element in the set matched elements in the specified text, whatever the set is, right? And if I go do the next one, it says set the content of each element in the set of matched elements in the specified set. Each element, right? So what I want to do here for this text is change the heading to say, you know, hello world, right? Now if I do this, right, and if I go back to the website, you can see that it says hello world. And it does it in like 2 seconds. Like it's kind of simple to get this done. That's why people prefer jQuery, because it's very short, right? So that makes sense. First, change the text of the first H1 element, the first one I get, to the first one, the first element that jQuery returns, change it to hello world, right? Okay. And you know, what about if I want to change something else? Like for example, I don't know, I want to change the style. So how do I do that? First, is there some kind of CSS? Oh my God, CSS, right? And what does it do for me? It says there's 14 or one of 4 different kinds of things. It says get the value of the style properties of the first element in the set of matched elements. Okay, so get the value. If I go down one, it says set one or more CSS properties for the value. So here's the property name and then the value. This is like set attribute or set style, right? CSS.style from JavaScript, right? Same thing. So if I want to do that, I can. It's a key value pairs. So let's say I want to make this thing instead of blue, let's make it red, right? So how do I do that? I would do something like my CSS of the first H1 element would be color, would be the property, and then, you know, red would be the value. And if I save it and I go back, you can see now that it's red, right? Nice and easy. So, you know, much different, right? Now, what if I want to chain all this together and I don't want to have my variable? And this is, by the way, a lot of times what we do. I'm just going to erase this thing for a second so you guys get some room. We do it all together like this. I take this piece because I want to do something with jQuery, right? I want to put a dot. This is called chaining, right? And then get this piece. And then put a dot in between and kill all this. And you can see that I don't even have to put this anymore. right? Just do this. That's why people use jQuery, because they can do this. Method chaining, and I don't have to even use a variable. I can say, hey, target this element, change the text to hello world, and change the color to red. Yeah. Yes, but the problem with it is it'll be like 2 lines, 3 lines. So people don't like that. They're just like, and this is, you know, very quick for them. So
it's
yeah.
point only to the first paragraph of like first HTML H1. Like the first paragraph or all the paragraphs?
This is just the first one. If I want to set all of them, then I have to do for each it's a different one. I have to do a different one here, right? So again, this is I just wanted to talk about this method chaining. So let's before we take a break, we're going to take a break now. But I want to talk about a couple things we've done so far, just as a recap for this video and for this part. All right, part 1, jQuery. See, a JavaScript library. It's a group of libraries for JavaScript to make JavaScript a little easier, right? Number 1. 2, it makes selectors and, you know, navigating the DOM and all that kind of stuff like we talked about before. All those things are nice, right? But, and it also has some nice plugins, by the way, like Jquery Ui, which we're going to get to later on. But, and here's the B in but, no code hinting, because just like any other library you download, Angular, whatever, right? Pick a library. You will not have code hinting in your editor. You will never get it from most editors. Not right now, right? In the future, that might be totally different. Right now, you have to do it manually, and we do that through typings. That's how we do it, yes.
Can we use the code
In our? Yes, absolutely. I want you to. Why would I hamstring you like that? And besides, your final test will be open book anyway, and open, right? So it doesn't matter. But yes, I would definitely recommend that. So, right, makes sense. Now here's all the changes we made to GitHub before we stop. We added in typings, and we changed our app.js. But all I'm saying is we just added typings. That's what we really did here. So I'm going to add these changes to the staging area. I'm going to say added typings for jQuery. So does this make sense to you? So one is jQuery, again, shortcut. If I'm going to ask you on a quiz next week, because it's going to be a quiz next week for sure on jQuery, right? This week, we're going to give you a little lab that I'm going to get you to do for Friday. I'm going to give it to you on Wednesday, so you get it done on Friday, right? But you know, when I ask you what jQuery is a shortcut. It's a group of libraries, a library set that gives you some, you know, so it allows you to do JavaScript easier, right? One disadvantage on the test is there's no code hinting. How do we fix that? Typings right now, right? Also, if you use Visual Studio, not Visual Studio Code, but actually Visual Studio with the big VS, right? Same. There's no code hinting for jQuery, right? Other larger, more proprietary things like Webstorm, and I got to bring this up, you know, because I got to be honest, right? If I was to bring up Webstorm, and Webstorm is a commercial grade editor, right? Which you can get for free as students for now, for a couple of years, right? I think it's 1 or 2 years free. If I want to open up this project, or maybe make a new project for a second, let's make a new one. Notice that there's a bunch of different starter projects here. You don't have to do this. I'm just showing you how this is. And I want to vary my location. Let's put this back into the location, right, for a thing which is the desktop. So here it is. And if I want to look at COMP125, here it is. So this is the location of my empty project, right? And it's a new project. I'm going to press create. In this, general location, it says directory uses is not empty. Would you like to create a project from the existing sources instead? No. Let's make it so that it's going to put in all this entire project. You can see that this gives me all the projects, right? And if I look at something like number 11, which we just came from, here it is. Let's just do number 11. And if I bring up thing, notice that, by the way, I got jQuery, QTest, and testl here. And if I bring up this stuff in here, so if I go to my scripts, and if I go to my app.js, right? Now this is just another editor for you guys to look at, right? If I go back into here, this is what I just did. Now because I have typings, if I go $, right? And if I hover over to get any kind of support, right? This is another editor. Okay, so Just saying, right? So another editor altogether. So if I $sign, and if I try and get some kind of code hinting, it gives me $J, jQuery test data core. I don't know. To me, do you see what this does? Okay, now let's try it. Start typing, right? And it tells me, well, here's my, init method. I could do init. So I'm in my init method. These are all my methods. Okay, let's keep going. What else can we do? Can I go put in document? I could. Gives me some coding, and then dot. Do I get ready? Do I get all my stuff? And I get some code hinting here. You can see that I'm getting code hinting. But I'm doing this, I'll be honest with you, because of the stuff that I'm getting from from my libraries. Notice here, I get this, right? Okay, so I'm getting code hinting here, but let's make a new project for a second, right? So without typing inside, really quickly. And I'm going to kill this Webstorm for a second, just for a second, right? And I'll make a new one. So I'm going to create a new project, and we're going to call this, we're going to put it inside that place again, COMP125. But I'm going to make a new project name, so we're going to call this Jquery test, so you can see that's the project name. And if I make a new project, here's my project. There's nothing in Jquery test right now. It's completely empty. If I want to add in a new HTML file, we'll add a new HTML file called index.html. So one of the great things about Webstorm, I got to tell you about this one, and a lot of people use it in the industry, is because it tells you the kind of file. You can also choose different older versions. If I go HTML5 and press OK, it gives you a bit of, boilerplate. Not much, but a little bit of it, right? And then I want to attach, we're going to do this really quickly, a new JavaScript file. So really quickly, I'll call this app.js, right? Here's app.js. And and if I was going to do something with NuGet, right? So I added in some jQuery library or whatever. I could do that. But even if I start typing, if I go $, and then if I start typing document dot, as an example, and if this is jQuery, I'm using jQuery. I don't have the jQuery library set up, but if you notice, even here, what kind of code engine do I get? Can I even do it? Even if the library gets attached, and by the way, I'll prove this to you by getting the library and putting it in, right? So how do I get this? I want to show this thing in my terminal, right? And again, one thing I'm really spoiled about is how quick and easy it is to do it with the terminal view, right? But here it is. Here's jQuery test. It has a built-in terminal, right? And here we go. So here's my stuff. And I want to do Bower init, right? Just like I would normally do. Just press enter so I can show you this thing. So just to be fair, right, to Webstorm, okay? And inside there, I want to do Bower install jQuery, right? As an example, -G. That's my safe, sorry. Not -G. All right, so I'm going to get jQuery. Great. Oh, I got 3.1. That's bad, right? We'll get it back again. I'll say go back here. Notice here's my Bower components. I didn't make anything in there. And in my Bower component, in my Bower.json file, you can see that I got 3.1.0. I'm going to get 2.2.4 for a second. And I'm going to just kill my Bower components here for a second. This is the way you do that. Delete. There we go. And I'll say just Bower install to get back the version that I want. 2.2.4. Okay, now I got the same version. So just to be fair with everything, I got the same version. And just to make sure that you can see that it's there. And if I go to my index.html again, and I want to install that version, I can't drag and drop, right? Even if only one does it for us is Microsoft. But I want to get is this jQuery min, and I want to put it here, right? Oh, it does it up here, right? There we go. I want to put this stuff down here really quickly. There we go. So really some really cool things with Webstorm, right? So I got my jQuery min, and I also want to definitely include my scripts, right? My app.js, which is inside here, right? So here's my app.js. I cut it from here and put it down here. Again, you don't have to do this. I'm just showing you Webstorm so you can see a different editor. Just to prove to you that there's no code hinting, right? Let me close all these down to be fair again. Yes, hold on a second. And I'm going to open this up again. So here's my index.html or my app.js. And now that I have jQuery installed, you would think that I should be able to get the same thing. So if I go $, right? Here's my selector and context. I'm getting some good things here because of jQuery. And if I start typing things like, as an example, my first H1, that's my selector, which I need a hashtag. I don't have this right now. Whoops. Hashtag first H1. It's starting to give me some basic stuff here. And if I go to ready, you can see that I'm getting it. And I didn't do anything. I didn't do typings. So professional editor, you know, as an example, Webstorm, jQuery, it understands. Okay? Just putting it out there. There's some advantages, right? Do I have to use typings? No, I don't, right? Should I use typings? I should, because it gives me more information, right? But I want to point out that you know, I have to say that, you know, Webstorm, it's not like Visual Studio Code. It's not free. You got to pay for it, right? It's another level editor. You'll get much better support. There's a little bit, you know, different kinds of stuff in here in terms of the way we set up a project and everything else. Some drag and drop support, but yeah, I would expect so. By the way, the same people that make Webstorm, which is IntelliJ, right, are the same people that do Android Studio and IntelliJ IDEA for Java. If I was ever going to do a Java course, IntelliJ IDEA all the way. Why not use Eclipse? Eclipse is tool. Well, not support as well. So, you know, there's some really good things here that you can do with a professional editor. Do we need a professional editor for what we're doing? No. Is it nice? Absolutely. Can you get it? Sure you can. If you want to use Webstorm for the remainder of the course, you can download it. All the power to you. If you have to, you can go on there and download it as a student. We're not going to be doing that. I'm just going to point it out that there are some advantages to doing this kind of stuff. Let's just get out of this because Webstorm is done. And let's take a short break. So again, what do we take from this? I can make any editor have good code hinting. Bower gets us the stuff. Typings gives us the code hinting for the stuff that we're getting. And then you can use it with things like brackets, or if you want to use it with Visual Studio Code or something else, you'll get better code hinting.